We're here at the AES show on the Sonnox booth with Andy, who's going to show us a drum gate which achieves the miraculous of separating different drum sounds even though they may be of similar levels. So this obviously isn't just a regular gate where you look at levels and either open or close the gate.
No, quite a bit more involved than that. So rather than relying, as Paul says, on just peak level, we're actually listening to the drum sounds. So to start off, we detect each transient, so every drum hit, and then we listen to them and essentially decide, is this a kick, snare, tom, or is it a profile that which we've created, or the user's created, to decide when we want to open or close that gate. Then we move on to the decay section. The decay has kind of a adaptive release time, which allows you to kind of tighten up around the ghost notes, stopping you getting that splashiness come through while still letting the main backbeats hit properly and breathe and resonate as they should do. The decay section can also be filtered in a way that focuses on the resonance. So you can, for example, let a tom boom or let a snare sizzle, while still getting rid of all that high-end cymbal spill or any low-end rumble, things like that. It really just focuses on the sound in a natural, realistic way. Then we have the leveler, which has two stages. So you can level either your backbeats completely separately from your ghost notes, or you can level everything to one level. So by using the two levels, it allows you to retain all the dynamic range, but just improve the consistency. We're not relying on compression, so you're not getting squishiness, you're not modifying the envelope, and you're not just bringing up the noise floor. It's a much more natural process. To finish it off, at the end, we have MIDI out. So that's either a live MIDI out, or you can capture into a buffer and just drag that onto your timeline, using the detection we've just been through to create those MIDI notes and give you a very accurate source for replacing or augmenting your drums.
So can you tell us anything about the machine learning that was used to allow it to identify drums? Because it's actually quite a difficult thing to do.
It is, yeah, and it's fairly time consuming as well as a small team. So we created a database of some 60, 70, 80,000 samples, and then we've trained different models. And those models look at several dozen different features. So there's a lot more than just sort of spectral processing, looking at like the centroid or the peak central of the spectrum. There's quite a lot more involved and a lot more behind it.
It sounds pretty amazing, and it's achieving a very high accuracy in separating drum sounds, I believe.
Yeah, we can give you a demo if that would be good.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And then at the end of that, you can tell us how much I'm going to have to pay to buy one.
Okay.
Thanks, Andy.
Cool. Okay, so we'll start with a completely ungated track just to give you context of what's happening. So you should hear there's a lot of kick, a lot of hi-hat bleed in the snare drum. It's occupying quite a similar frequency range. It's all sort of based in the mids. And some of the hi-hats and kicks are actually considerably louder than the snare drum itself. So by turning on the Oxford drum gate, what we're going to start with is just what a normal gate would do. So you can hear that it is opening up for the ghost notes, but it's also opening up for the kicks and hi-hats, which we don't want. So this is kind of where the magic comes in. By choosing snare, as this is a snare drum, we've now just isolated the snare. We know by listening to these which hit is which, and so we can decide, and you can see on these meters, how something has been classified, and because we've chosen the snare, that's all you're going to hear. If I move through the plugin, you'll see in the decay section, we have a couple of unique features. So as I mentioned, we have this resonant decay, and this lets you focus on the body of the snare, or we could bring it up and accent the sizzle and the snare wires. If I bring it back down here. There's also, towards the end of the ghost notes, you'll probably hear a little bit of excess bleed, and that's due to the length of the decay. If I was to just raise the decay time, we're going to have just lots more spill in between, and we're not going to actually achieve the effect of gating that we want to achieve. So by bringing this up, the release time becomes adaptive, and so when it's shorter, when the hits are softer, the release is also shorter. Finally, we have the leveler, and so you can see there's two targets here. This allows me to bring up the ghost notes or down, irrespective of what the loud notes are doing. And we can position them in the mix, so if, for example, it's getting too busy in the mix, then we can bring them down, or if we're kind of missing the groove from the ghost notes, then we can bring them up. We can also do this to the loud notes to keep everything really consistent without just resorting to compression. Lastly, we have MIDI out, which, as I mentioned, we can either capture into a buffer, drag onto a timeline, and that will all sync up, or you can use live MIDI out just to trigger your samples in real time.
So Andy, that looks pretty impressive. It does what most of us previously thought would be impossible for a gate to do. Is it going to be expensive, and when can we buy one? Is it shipping yet?
It is. It came out a week ago today, and it's on an introductory offer with 25% off until December the 4th. When it reverts back to full price, that will be $230 or around £170.
Excellent. Can't wait to try it. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.